Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well. Obviously the game is still going on, so the Burnley game can still change things quite a bit. But I think most people's scores are relatively settled. I obviously unfortunately got the Dennis captaincy, so the week wasn't the best, but Laporte did manage to save it. So I'm pretty much going to end up with what I would say is going to be a pretty average kind of green. I guess with the around my rank tier, King's low ownership is nice. I'll get a little bit of benefit of that, probably 23% of that. But if João Pedro or anyone else really does well in the Watford game, even some Burnley players, for example, then that could be a little bit tricky, maybe securing that green arrow. But it should be there. So hello from Algeria. Hope you're doing well. Sorry about the AFCON exit, unfortunately. 43 plus King, that's awesome, honestly. 43 might be one of the highest scores I've seen this week. I think anything above like 38 is really, really, really good. I think the safety score around FPL Focals tier was also around 32, 33. It's been a very, very bad week for people. And realistically, I mean, one of the options, for example, that we suggested in the team selection video was obviously KDB. And once again, he's done tremendously well. So he's definitely going to be on people's kind of transfer radars, but you still have Salah coming back. Even Fernandes having potentially a double game week makes it quite difficult. And even Kane, who is several games behind a lot of players, with Son maybe coming back from injury, that could be quite interesting too. But I'm looking at my team now. I think the issues with the team is definitely going to be Reguilon, who doesn't even seem to be getting consistent minutes at Spurs. So he seems like a very easy transfer out to Luca Dean, who has really, really good games with Aston Villa, potentially even a double within the next 2 weeks. And Gray is a question mark. Perhaps I'd actually like to keep Maddison in my bench this week if I, let's say, bring Salah in. I'm thinking I'll probably go for a -4 this week, where I'll play Antonio, take him off the bench, and then play Bowen, Rafinha, Jota, maybe Salah, or Fernandes, whoever I pick from the two of them, and then continue with De Gea and then the kind of back four. But instead of Cody this week, it'll be Luca Dean is going to be my rough plan. When is Salah returning? Salah should actually come back to us within game week 24. So the idea is, because if you look at the dates of the AFCON kind of cup, first of all, Egypt has a very, very tough match versus Ivory Coast on Wednesday. So that is a very likely exit for them in the tournament, according to the bookies and just generally the strength of the teams on paper. Even though Egypt might go through, realistically, we're saying that the final is going to be held in Sunday, the 6th of February, and we know that Game Week 24 only starts around 9th of Feb, and Liverpool play 10th of February. So, best case scenario for Egypt, if you're a fan of the Egyptian national team, then you'd probably still get Salah with very, very minimal rest, and maybe he misses Game Week 24. But I think it's very likely that he does play for an Egyptian team who probably will get knocked out before the quarterfinals, unfortunately. So that's going to be the situation where Salah comes back to our teams in Game Week 24. One thing to actually keep in mind, though, is if you are interested in Liverpool players, is you are kind of staring at a future blank in 27. So whilst the games are really, really good in 24, 25, 26, 24 is a little bit debatable, because I would say Leicester are quite an organized team, especially now that they have James Justin back in defense. I think he's a really, really big kind of defensive improvement on anyone in the fullback position. If you watched, for example, football last season, you would know how good James Justin was. I think he was a very, very good one-on-one defender, and he could be very good on the left flank dealing with Salah. So we'll see what happens there. Good evening to everyone as well. King red card and João Pedro hat-trick, please. I mean, that would be good for you, Dennis. I'm not actually sure what João Pedro's selection percentage is. I don't imagine it would be that high, right? A lot of people did go for Foster, so maybe if he comes back, that could hurt my rank a little bit. But yeah, João Pedro's, I think, rank percentage ownership it was not too high. Let's just quickly have a look. Yeah, not too many people really captained him at all, and ultimately it's a 0.46% captaincy, so not the worst thing. Foster, I would actually suggest that he probably misses out the next game as well. We'll see what happens. Obviously, there's going to be a caretaker manager. Ranieri has just been sacked, so that's going to be a big impact. 24 all out, praying for no Foster. Free hit 27. I mean, it really depends on the situation, right? So we need to have a little bit more of insight through the double game weeks because as of now, yes, there's a couple blanks, especially I think with Arsenal and Chelsea here. But my team is actually kind of built for this sort of situation. I'm planning to make sure by game week 28 that I go back into these Arsenal and Chelsea assets, but before then, I'm in a pretty good position because I don't have any Arsenal and Chelsea players. I think the plan is short term. If you keep maybe one or two Arsenal and Chelsea players at best, that's possible. And also Dennis, right? I didn't actually find my signed jersey is actually back home in Hong Kong, so I don't actually have it with me now. Um, 35 points with King remaining. That's actually that's great. I think. I mean, you're a little bit above safety. This was a week of very kind of small variance because the kind of ceiling for the game week was very very low. Ultimately, not many, I think, relatively well owned players did well this week. So there's almost no differentials, with really exception to KDB, Laporte, those kind of being key examples, or even Robertson, for example. 25 with King Captain. Yeah, King Captain's going to be a nice positive for a lot of people, I imagine. That's really nice. Imagine the scenes of King scores. That would be really positive for me because I would get a 23% boost from that. So I would really, really enjoy that. Hey, Zodiac, hope you're doing well. Evening. Thoughts on Edouard? I like Edouard, but the one thing about Crystal Palace is that they have played quite a few games. So if we actually look at the league table, Palace are a team that have played 22 games. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think Edouard's exceptionally in form. And he's definitely kind of taken that spot over Benteke. But ultimately, I think the one kind of concerning thing is, with exception to this Norwich and kind of Brentford game, doesn't make sense to own a Chelsea asset when some of the other forwards have better games. So I would, for example, suggest, even though Watkins is a bit more expensive than Edouard, that he's got really, really clean games and is still a focal point and a talisman. Whereas I imagine Edouard will kind of struggle to score and contribute in some of the games ahead. He is a nice short-term option though, so definitely if let's say you're planning to move away from Dennis, and actually want to cut down on, let's say, the cost of your strikers, then Edouard could be a very good option. Very good flexi option, kind of at that Tony price range. From 5k to 18k in 2 game weeks. I'm sorry to hear about that. 48 with De Gea off the bench to hopefully come on. That's going to be massive, Jordan. I guess you have Foster right now. 27 points for Foster and King left to go. Yeah. Let's talk FPL, and Simply FPL is planning to use their wildcard the upcoming game week. That's an interesting one. I would say it's a weird one because as we did say, you look at, let's say, the Chelsea and Arsenal players, right? For me, there's a massive swing in FPL in game week 28, and we'll go through that together. So if we look at Rudiger as an example, let's say you wildcard this week, you would get ahead of the curve, I guess. I think the people who need to wildcard now are people who might be overinvested into Chelsea and Arsenal, because obviously this kind of situation here is terrible for Chelsea. But I mean, look how sweet the games are in 28. In my opinion, like I'm kind of set where at least by 26 and 27, I need to make sure that I roll a transfer, maybe around 27, where I can at least get back into Arsenal and Chelsea players. So Chelsea have a basically miraculous run from 28 onwards, and that's what I'm concerned with. If you're wildcarding now, you might be stuck in a similar situation as someone like I am, where you still have to kind of plan ahead and make sure you kind of reclaim these Chelsea players. Reece James, for example, is someone who should come back from injury and do extremely well. So that's going to be one concern that I have if you're going for a wildcard this week. As far as Ramsdale, I really like him in 28 onwards as well. If you look at De Gea in my team, De Gea has beautiful games until 27. Then he actually has a very, very kind of rough patch here. City, Tottenham, Liverpool. I imagine they'll probably even concede in the Leicester game. So this is almost 4 games in a row where I would probably say that United are destined to lose their clean sheets. And I think there's a beautiful kind of swing into Ramsdale, who's probably going to be my season kind of ender up until at least this period, where maybe some of these games have to be kind of rescheduled. That's the weird thing with Arsenal, but it's not too alarming as I do have Sanchez as a backup keeper. That's maybe a plan there, but alternatively, I could also just keep De Gea, maybe just play around with Sanchez, who doesn't have the worst games. Still a kind of bad patch here in 29-30, which is also coinciding with De Gea's kind of bad run. but you have the option of as well of going for someone like Tierney, who I think is amazing. So I think Tierney, James, Rudiger, those are all going to be options that we need to think about 28 and onwards. So if you're wildcarding now, I think it is a little bit worrisome. Planning to KDB captain until Salah comes back. Have no faith with Watford players. Never will I have any players from Watford. I mean, that's a good choice, to be fair. I have benefited at some times with Dennis, though, at points in the season, so I'm pretty happy to have had Dennis at some points. You're saving your wild card for the Chelsea fixture swing. Yeah, I think that makes complete sense, as I said. It's quite hard to actually navigate that situation if you don't plan ahead, right? If you're wildcarding now, basically in 3 to 4 game weeks time, you have to change quite drastically what your team will look like. The nice thing maybe is that you, if like let's say if I plan to take a -4 now, and my kind of ideal scenario is I go for Luka Dean, and then I drop Gray, even though he does play versus Newcastle, and go into Salah, then I've got 3.0 to kind of spend around my team once again, and maybe play around with another more kind of high tier midfielder, or even an upgrade on Dennis or King. So that's an option as well. Really depends on what kind of doubles come my way. I don't see myself playing a double premium for the rest of the season. I just really like the talismans from some of the other teams. Ziyech is actually quite interesting. If let's say Chelsea return on 28, Ziyech is at a very kind of funny price where I think he's a beautiful kind of swap from Maddison, or as an example, or even Bowen if I'm no longer that interested in Bowen, or even Rafinha as well. Same kind of scenario there where I've got enough money to kind of uplift my team from that kind of point of view. And I imagine I'll probably boost up Dennis into Watkins as well at some point. But whether I want to actually double up into Aston Villa is another question. You're not so sure about having 2 Liverpool defenders. Clean sheet wise, they were pretty leaky against Palace. However, Trent Robertson are giving. That's the thing. I mean, it's the same thing with City. I mean, obviously City are I would say a better defense this season than Liverpool, and that's why I have Laporte and Cancelo at this point in time, and that's why kind of Laporte was my priority kind of differential pick on the wild card. But Robertson seems to be in really, really good form, and if we look at the effective ownership for the rest of the season, I think it's very hard to get off of Trent, especially if you got Trent at a decent price. He still has the ability to basically consistently get double-digit points every few weeks, and if you miss that, you're going to hurt really bad. That's the kind of scenario there. Whereas with Robertson, his ownership is so low, but you're really juggling with going away from Salah for a while, unless you've chosen kind of not to go with Jota, so that's tough. Is Dean nailed in his cash bet? I think Dean is absolutely nailed. Dean is nailed. I think Dean looks fantastic. The nice thing is that he's taking set pieces as well for this team. Jerome, first 37 points this week. This is so bad. Honestly, 37 points is something I'll absolutely take. I've got 33 and a -2 captain. So really, who's doing better? But yeah, I think Dean is nailed. I think Cash actually crosses a lot, but I would say Dean is a bit more efficient with how he actually provides chances. Still not convinced with Villa assets. I actually agree. I don't think Villa are a very, very good team in open play. If we actually look at Villa, I would say that they're a team that completely predicates off of, first of all, some of the individual talent of their strike force and their kind of attacking force. I agree Ramsey is an absolute baller. I think Ramsey is interesting because I will propose maybe a team structure change. If let's say you did want to go for a double premium, then I think let's say if Gray becomes Ramsey, and then you play a structure that's kind of like, let's say we drop Rafinha and Maddison for the sake of just a kind of explanation, then you can kind of roughly go for Salah if let's say Reguilon becomes Dean as an example. Ramsey does allow for a lot of players to make a very flexible team. So even like Dennis and King could be even downgraded to something like a Broja at this point in time, if you really don't fancy Watford, and to be honest, that could be a good decision. So you could go for a double premium structure like so, and this might even allow you to afford someone like Kevin De Bruyne, right? So if we go for Broja at 5.2, then we do have enough cash, for example, here to go into even De Bruyne. So that's the kind of benefit of actually having Ramsey. And once he has these double game weeks rescheduled, I mean, Burnley and Leeds are really, really nice matches whenever they kind of come in, hopefully between 24 and 28. I mean, I think Ramsey will be a huge differential. And it kind of allows you to sidestep Coutinho and Maddison as well, which is nice. or sorry, not Coutinho, but not Madison, sorry, but Buendia, for example. You were on cash before Dean moved. I mean, that's tough. Yeah, I agree. I think unfortunately for people who own cash, it's gonna feel weird moving into Dean. I think it's a side grade that's probably not worth it. Burnley ruined everything for me. The Burnley postponement ruined everything. I mean, I've been ruined by several postponements, but that's unfortunately the way the season has gone. Villa will have a new talisman every game. That's what I feel. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, they're scoring off of set pieces, right? Buendia scored a header last week. If you look at their expected goals, still very, very low versus an Everton team who obviously were parking the bus. But yeah, consistently, I would say Aston Villa don't build too many chances. United did collapse there in that week, so I would say that's a bit of an odd example. This game was cancelled 1.14 versus Brentford. They're not exactly the most explosive team right now, but they are quite compact, which is the nice kind of benefit of actually owning Dean. Maybe if you actually don't go Watkins and don't go Coutinho, then someone like Dean or Cash can actually make a lot of sense. If you just want to own one Villa asset and not feel too bad about missing out. So if you look at expected goals, you can actually see that Aston Villa ranked very, very near the bottom half of the table in terms of creating chances. A good comparison is another team like Wolves, who really don't score many goals, and you can see that Aston Villa have actually kind of outscored their goal tally. So they've scored 28 goals as opposed to creating 22 expected goals. So that basically suggests to us, I think, first of all, that they actually score a lot of set pieces, and they're also very clinical as a team, which is a bit of a benefit. But I think that guy is completely right when he says that there's different talismans. The nice thing though is if you go with the defender, that clean sheets are, I mean, guaranteed when they're actually given. So temporarily doubling up, Rudy out, more priority. Yep, that makes sense. I mean, there's 3 blanks in the future. Definitely have to get out of them. Hey Sahaj, hope you're doing well. Don't talk to Fran about postponements. I'll definitely win. Yeah, I mean, we can go back a couple weeks and have a look at how many postponements. I'm pretty sure I dealt with postponements as soon as even the Burnley kind of snow game was confirmed. Probably somewhere here. Nope. I can't even remember exactly when the postponements kind of set in. Was it around 14? No, I think it was the game right after this, or game before this actually, 12. My memory's pretty terrible. Maybe 13. Yeah, this is when the postponement started, so I kind of missed out on Cornet and Kane, and then I'm pretty sure Cornet got injured 2 games after this, so that was rough. But yeah. Oh well. When do I've already actually used my wildcard Jankster. So I used my wildcard in 21. Deliberately to kind of bring Laporte and also bring Cody back into the team, and also bring in another substitute keeper. At the time, it was also to kind of target the Everton double game week, but unfortunately that kind of fell to the wayside. So I did wildcard in 21 here and went for Son. So I had to kind of accommodate for that. I think my team didn't have Bowen at the time as well, so I kind of had to bring Bowen in as a captaincy option, which was obviously very good. This was something that saved my rank temporarily, but still, the bench choices in the last few weeks haven't been the absolute best. This week was actually a good bench selection. I think Laporte, or sorry, I had 20 points left on the bench last week, but I was still gambling on that kind of Everton game versus Norwich. Temporarily doubling up. Sorry, yeah. Madison over Coutinho. I would probably say Coutinho is a little bit more interesting unless Leicester have some games rescheduled. My overall rank right now is around 72k. So I peaked at 2k this season. Yeah, around here, and then fell extremely hard. Like look at how many reds this is consistently. And this is because I had Kane for a long run, and I had Cornet as well for a long run. Meanwhile, other players like Gallagher and a couple other assets were doing extremely well. Madison as well had a very, very good run there, whilst I was keeping Cornet, and I had a lot of kind of postponement issues. So I think around like 16 and stuff, I was dealing with constant postponements of, was it maybe, yeah, these kind of postponements were the ones that really killed me, because I did actually go for Dennis and King very early, even Dallo and De Gea for a long time. So these kind of postponements with United and Watford really crippled me in those weeks, and then I hit a kind of rock bottom here at 106k, fell out of 100k, but slowly but surely I think I've gone back up a little bit more, and hopefully this game week ends a little bit well, hopefully with King doing well. Do I think Foster is going to play? I don't actually think so. Because if he's been staying at home with COVID, then it probably just means that he hasn't been in training. And since Bachmann is actually quite a serviceable keeper, I think Bachmann probably plays the next game. Is Salah 100% back for Leicester? I would not say 100. I'd say probably close towards 85%. You're at 50k, Dennis. That's awesome. Henry says, Fran, I have Ronaldo. Think about keeping him until the United double in Gameweek 25, then moving him to Salah in 26. But is that too late to get Salah? It's a weird one because Salah has a really good game in 26 versus Norwich. But you then have a scenario where Salah has an immediate blank in 27. So I think if you do really want to keep Ronaldo until 25, then you might as well keep Ronaldo until 28 potentially, or even because Salah has a blank in 27. So let me kind of show you what I mean. So if you look at, for example, if you triple up on Liverpool and you don't want to go for Liverpool until 26, then you do basically have one nice game versus Norwich, and then you hit straight into a blank. Whereas if you go into Salah now versus Leicester, then I think it's more justifiable, because then maybe I would say you might have a better plan towards addressing this blank in 27. It's going to be a weird one where hopefully, I think the nice thing with my team now is that I'm quite happy with everyone's kind of games in 27. Maybe not Cody's necessarily, but if I had to play a full team and Liverpool continued to blank as expected, then I think I still have a rather serviceable squad, especially if I bring Dean back in, who should have a good game there. West Ham also have an okay game versus Wolves. Probably going to be a low scoring one, so that's not the most beneficial, but yeah. CM Punk, what would your chip strategy be if you had all your chips intact? I guess my question first would be, when you say all your chips intact, do you mean both 3 hits, 1 wild card, and the triple captain? Is that kind of what you're suggesting, or also bench boost? Or have we already used 1 free hit so far? Yeah, Vinicius is actually cheering me up every week, which is really, really nice. My game week score right now is 33. 3 hit and 27. I don't really need to 3 hit and 27 because I don't have any Arsenal and Chelsea players. So yeah. Oh, but I guess yeah, okay, that makes sense. You're trying to sidestep the Liverpool situation. I don't know if I want a free hit in 27 because I've already used 1 free hit this season, and I really do plan on maybe free hitting later in the season when my team actually has more issues, because right now I have, for example, 2 playing keepers, so no real issues there. And if 3 Liverpool players are out and I replace one of Dennis and King, let's see what kind of match they have in 27. Still a pretty tough one. Maybe I'll have to free hit there. I won't have Gray. City still have a decent match there versus Everton. My transfer plans for the next game weeks. It's going to be interesting. I think my transfer plans are first to get Salah or maybe Fernandes. I'll have to make a decision between the 2 this week. And then I plan on taking Reguilon out for Dean. Basically, I've been quite unimpressed by Reguilon, just because he hasn't been playing games consistently. And then Dean also has a beautiful run until 29. So, I mean, realistically, we're talking basically until 32, where he has great games. Am I only checking Twitter DMs during deadline streams? I mean, I could check Twitter DMs now, but I'm trying to respond to chat as much as possible. If I had Ronaldo, would I get him out for Salah or have them both? I'd probably try get them both, but I need to kind of see what your team looks like. Like, what are you sacrificing to go for Ronaldo and Salah? Hey Pete, first time on the channel, welcome. And Jankster Jr. as well, thank you. Welcome to Manager. Welcome. Thank you so much for supporting as well, Jankster. Really, really appreciate it. Rizwan says, do I downgrade Ronaldo in order to upgrade Jota to Salah, or do I keep Jota and bring Salah in for someone else? That's a good question. I would actually say that we have a little bit of concerns with Ronaldo in terms of his efficiency as a player. So I would actually say that Salah is still worthwhile. I think over the course of the season, we've seen that Salah has been tremendous. I would, even with the 25 double, I mean, I'd be even more tempted by Fernandes around that point in time than Ronaldo. But do I really want to actually go for a United player and lock that in? Probably not. My transfer plan is probably Dean and Salah this week. Antonio and Jamaica squad for 3 games. I'll have to actually look at that. Jota might actually play better with Salah around. I mean, definitely, I think Salah will create a lot of chances. I think Jota has been. I mean, this team, the expected goals that Liverpool scores when they actually have their front three, or not scores, but rather just kind of accumulate as a team, is pretty astounding. I mean, look at that. I mean, Liverpool lead the league in expected goals, and I mean, there's no wonder why, really. Um, so I think Jota benefits in general when Salah plays, because he is someone who actually can take defenders away from him, and then also create a lot of space. Boris should have been sacked before Ranieri, but we move. Yeah, I mean, that's a interesting situation, definitely. I was quite shocked that Boris didn't invite me to the Christmas party. It's a bit of a shame. Madison to Salah. I would actually be tempted to keep Madison and maybe just keep and put Madison to my bench. I know Gray has a good game versus Newcastle, but I don't really have much faith in Everton. Maybe I'm wrong to do that, but if we look at, let's say, I would say Leicester is obviously definitely a better team than Everton at this point in time. And then if Leicester actually have doubles, they're also in a similar position where they have only 20 games played, just like Everton. And I really think that Leicester will have much more goals scored, which Madison will be contributing towards. So I would like to keep Madison on my bench for this week. Do I think Dalot is nailed? He's obviously the best fullback in the team right now. I mean, yeah, especially with the kind of Shaw kind of being in and out of the team. Dalot has somewhat found his place back into the team, and in my cheat sheet, I definitely will be kind of boosting Dalot back up this week once again. And so he gets a kind of subsequent rise on a back-to-back week. How is Broja as an option? So Broja is kind of at that tier where I think you basically have Broja as a default bench player, and he allows you to spread your funds in the midfield if you really want to do that. So I think Broja is a fantastic option. I mean, no one is even close to him in terms of price, right? We have someone like King, who, let's be honest, Watford are kind of trending off. Their good games are also meeting a kind of abrupt end, probably around this West Ham game. And then I would say this kind of run here is a little bit tough. So Broja is interesting. I wouldn't say Broja has the best games himself, but at least he does allow you a bit of cost saving. So Broja has some tough games here, but still very, very smooth games post 25. So I think a simple transfer in the future is to actually book in Broja for one of these two players, like Dennis Stroke King, or if you only have one, I mean, that can be a future transfer booked at around 26. On the trip strategy, if you had both free hits, Wildcard, BB, and TC left, yeah, okay, that's a good question. Let's actually have a look at Ben Crellin's kind of spreadsheet, because I think that's the best sort of resource to actually look at to formulate a plan. Now, the first thing I would actually say is that CM Punk, sorry. So I would say that the bench boost is a chip that you can actually play in isolation, and the same thing with the triple captaincy. Those don't have to be employed in any specific weeks, because right now we don't know when exactly the postponed games will be rescheduled. So I would say that the bench boost and the triple captain could be played in isolation. Now, a lot of people do like to actually play bench boost and wildcard in succession, so I will discuss that as a concept. But let's go into Ben Crellin's kind of cheat sheet, and we will kind of look at that together. So this is kind of Ben Crellin's cheat sheet. And the suggestion here with this kind of sheet is that 36 and 37 probably have a high chance of being a double game week. 36 is going to be a very massive double game week. So the idea here, I think, is that you can maybe set up your team to have a wild card in 36. Then you can actually play the bench boost in 37. So because you would, in theory, know all the games that would be played on 36 and 37, you would set your wildcard up knowing that you would play maybe a starting 11 in 36, and then have a very kind of well-rounded team that also accommodates for whatever you want to play in 37. So you probably have the option of going for a wildcard and bench boost around 36, 37. The one thing with the 27 blank game week is, because you do have 2 free hits this season, I would usually advise not using a free hit on a blank game week, because what happens with the blank game week, if you imagine, is that everyone kind of keeps the same players. So the ceiling is actually very low for a free hit, if that makes sense. Everyone kind of consolidates into the same amount of players. Maybe some people will play 10 players, maybe some people will play 9 players, but even if you have the full 11 on a free hit, it might not be that optimal, right? Because if let's say you take Liverpool out, then a lot of the points that could potentially be earned in that week are kind of gone. some of the premiums aren't playing in that week. So that's a tough little situation there, especially with also Chelsea and Arsenal, I think, having potential blanks. So it really depends on your team situation. If you really are maybe having, let's say, 4 to 5 to even 6 players missing in 27, I can completely understand maybe free hitting there. But keep in mind that also kind of removes one transfer for 28. So I would actually say that if your team structure can accommodate for the blank in 27, and you don't really have to deal with the Arsenal and Chelsea blanks because your team is well suited, then I would actually save up your free hit for whenever there's a nice double game week that you'd like to kind of capitalize on. Because in theory, if you have 2 free hits, you have an insurance free hit that you can use at any time this season, potentially even in this kind of blank here in game week 30, where due to the kind of cup games and the way they're kind of fixed here, maybe you can use, let's say, free hit 27, free hit 30, and then kind of wild card 36, and then attack 37 with a bench boost. Maybe triple captain and any of these double game weeks. As I said, triple captain is something that you definitely don't have to play off of a wild card. You don't have to actually play that in tandem with any other chip because it doesn't really benefit. I mean, most of the time you will have a nice triple captain. For example, like let's look at Bowen or even Fernandes in the last 2 kind of small double game weeks. That could be a good scenario to use a triple captain. So for example here, 26 could be a double game week as per Ben's suggestion, even 25, 28, 29, just because these should be the games and the game weeks where when we look at the EPL table, a team like Tottenham, a team like Leicester, a team like Everton have 20 games played. So they need to have these games rescheduled and they need to play them. Even Burnley, for example, could be a good pick. And you would be kind of suited in a sense to play a triple captain in one of those smaller double game weeks where maybe, let's say, only Leicester has a double game week, just like, for example, only Watford had a double game week this week. So that would be the optimal play, I think, in terms of chip strategy. But once again, it really comes down to exactly what your team situation is. Some people might be inclined to wildcard soon because one thing that people like to do in FPL is to kind of dead end their teams. That's another concept that is where, let's say, we all know that Chelsea and Arsenal have a series of blanks, right? So what you could do is go completely away from Chelsea and Arsenal now, capitalize on a lot of differential assets. So for example, going for KDB in the short term, going for Fernandes in the short term, and maybe omitting Salah. And you can kind of dead end your team because, as we know, Man United hit a brick wall of fixtures in 28. So let's say if you're very over-invested into Man United and you kept players like Dalot, kept players like De Gea, kept players like Fernandes, maybe even if you tripled up United until 28, you can dead end your team until 28 and then wildcard into Chelsea and Arsenal players in Game Week 28. That's another option too, and then you kind of play the rest of your season as it goes. So I sort of dead ended my team in 21, and then wildcarded on it. So that was the kind of situation I wanted. But I think it's because I saw a structure where this team is very bench boostable. Maybe my strikers are quite poor right now. They could change in the next few weeks, but I would say, let's say when Gray becomes Salah and Dennis maybe becomes Broja in the future, that the bulk of my team, and especially with Reguilon being Dean, the bulk of my team becomes very interesting in potential weeks where I have a bench boost. And that's kind of why I'm planning on bench boosting in the short term. Maybe I'll also triple captain in the next few weeks. As we said, there's a lot of double game weeks ahead in this kind of structure here. But I would say if you still have your wild card and bench boost, maybe you could actually save it up for 36 and 37. If you're a player like me who has already used most of your chips, you still have triple captain, still have bench boost. I would maybe bench boost in isolation one of these weeks here when you have a nice set of games. Same with 28 and 29 potentially, where you could triple captain someone. And then maybe you could actually free hit in 36 where there's a huge double game week and you can pick the best players that you'd like. With 37 potentially also being a week where you actually finally kind of bench boost your team. It's really up to you. But we need to kind of first have a look at what games are rescheduled and when they're rescheduled in terms of game weeks. But I would say for now, because the size of the double game weeks aren't large, you would probably be at best looking to use your triple captain or bench boost, right? Because those are the kind of chips that kind of benefit smaller game weeks, whereas a double game week could be quite beneficial for free hitters, like a big one in 36, or a wild card as well. Martial is off. Lingard might go to Newcastle. United might finally sign a DM in Kamara. That would be actually quite beneficial, obviously. I think for a long time they've been kind of over-reliant on Matic and Nemanja Matic, what he kind of brings to the table as someone who kind of pockets the space between Maguire as well. But hopefully United will actually improve in the midfield. People are thinking of dead ending into Game Week 30. Yep, that's true. There's a big blank in 30, so that makes sense. Jerome, you save the transfer and you might get Coutinho and Salah next week for free. Yep, fair enough. Let's have a look. Sorry, I might have missed chat a bit whilst I was actually talking. Rizwan says, I got Laporte in 2 games ago. It seemed like a no-brainer to me, but I didn't realize how much of a differential he was. Exactly. I mean, Laporte, I think, has 9% ownership, which is really, really low. And I mean, his expected goals actually double Diaz. So that's kind of how impactful he is. Jerome's got Dallo off his bench. That's awesome. Well done there. People sleeping on Gallagher for the next couple of fixtures. I don't think so. I think Gallagher and Edouard are both very, very interesting for the next few games. I think the one thing, though, is Crystal Palace are slightly more ahead in terms of games played. So that's an interesting thing. I'm going to also have a look briefly at kind of price trends and the transfer trends as well for strikers. So it seems like quite a lot of people are actually going into Edouard. So as you can see, I guess in some senses, Crystal Palace is actually quite well rated, and people have been kind of seeing the value in going for Edouard and diversifying from their kind of Watford base. Midfielders, people going back into Bowen. Surprisingly, I think I'm surprised people didn't have Bowen in the first place. I imagine this is mostly casual players. So people are finally starting to move away from Bernardo, which is interesting. And a lot of Arsenal players, I imagine people are going out of. Coutinho and De Bruyne are big options, and people are already kind of moving back into Salah. And even Gallagher, as we mentioned. So I think, yeah, people are kind of staying on track with how good Crystal Palace has been performing. And that's probably also one of the effects of playing a big team as well. I think Crystal Palace have done quite well. For example, beating City this season. Let's have a look at some defender price trends. So people going out of James. Surprised people still own James. Some people going to Robertson. So that kind of dead ends your team a little bit with Liverpool players. Because I imagine a lot of people have Trent. And then also Robertson kind of is a little bit too pricey, in my opinion. You got tempted by the Gray and Emerson Royale to Salah and Dean this week. I think that makes a lot of sense, Ayrton. 19 points, that's unfortunate. I saw FPL Mate, I think, is on 17 points, which is a little bit rough. Salah, Jota, Bowen, Foden, and Rafinha template. Yeah, I think so. By the time Game Week 28 comes back, I think the Arsenal players and even Mount or even Ziyech could become part of the template. Trossard or Gray to ditch for Salah. I would prefer the game that Gray has, so I'd probably go away from Trossard. I just don't think Brighton create enough chances, and they're a similar team to Aston Villa where I think it's tough to pick the correct attacking asset. I would say that Watkins is actually the talisman for Aston Villa. If you look at the underlying stats for Aston Villa, that will also kind of confirm that as the case. The one thing that is a little bit scary is that he might not be on penalties, but I'm not that interested right now in going for Coutinho. I'd much rather just go for Salah this week and then go for Dean, who I think would give me enough coverage of Aston Villa. You've wildcarded for Game Week 24 and gone with Foster, Robertson, Trent, Cancelo. That's a very, very strong backline. Fair enough. You've gone for KDB and Salah. That's a very strong team, Pete. That's actually a very, very strong team. And also very, very kind of well diversified. I guess the one transfer that you might have to make in the future is potentially going to be maybe, let's say, dropping one of the West Ham players. But I think for the most part, that's an interesting wild card. I would maybe consider Watkins over Antonio, but that's completely up to you. I think Antonio has a really good game versus Watford, so we'll see what happens there. That's the only thing I would say. Who's your keeper apart from Foster? Just kind of curious. So CM Punk says wildcard 31, bench boost 36, triple captain when Liverpool doubles. Yep, makes a lot of sense. Free hit 33, and another one where there are a few doubles. Hey Liam, haven't seen you in a long time as well. Hope you're doing well. I'll have a look at your team, Jangsta, in a very short second. Trossard or Gray to ditch for Salah for the coming game week. I'd probably bench Trossard. Or take Trossard out of my team. I'm doing well, Liam. I would keep Watkins. I think Watkins has very, very good games. Leeds fixtures. I don't think Rafinha is necessarily template. I think he kind of shares that template position with Maddison, to be honest. Because yes, whilst Leicester's games look poor, if they actually have games rescheduled in the very short term, then Maddison actually will have rather good double game weeks. And we've also seen Leicester capable of scoring versus big teams, which is the nice little positive there. De Bruyne. I mean, De Bruyne makes a lot of sense. I just can't really afford both De Bruyne and Salah right now under my team structure. You said it last year, and you said again, Man City just struggled versus Southampton, results back, and no surprise they dropped points. That's true. I remember, I think, like Che Adams scored last year versus Man City, right? It was quite a good game from Southampton. I mean, you can always see it with the way kind of Pep speaks about Hasenhüttl in press conferences. He's very kind of admirable, or admiring, sorry, of Hasenhüttl and the way he coaches his team. You wildcard in 21, sold DCL in 22, sold Gray in 23. I mean, that's fair enough. I think you've done well selling both of them because it's not like they've... I think Folklore, for example, had a similar structure to my team where he went into Dennis this week. Stannis, thank you so much. Is Watkins a good option, or should I go with 2 cheap forwards alongside Antonio and go heavy on my midfield and defense and get the likes of Mount, James, and Laporte? Stannis, I would say that you should avoid going for Mount and James right now because Chelsea have a lot of blanks in the near future. Are you talking about like Gameweek 24 or somewhere like later in the future, right? Are you talking about Chelsea around Gameweek 28? Because I'll kind of show you something right now, Stannis. If you look at Chelsea, let's look at Rudiger as an example. So Chelsea are actually going to miss out in Gameweeks 24, 25, and 27, and that's because Chelsea are going to the, I think, I think International Club World Cup, right? I'm not even sure what it's actually specifically called. Yeah, so Chelsea are actually going to be playing in the Club World Cup. So I would actually avoid Chelsea players right now. I like the idea of going for Laporte, Stannis, but definitely not any Chelsea players at this point in time. Chelsea players are a good option after Game Week 27, so you would look at Chelsea around Game Week 28. Watkins for me is a good option. I think so, and I think Luca Dean is a very good option too. So if let's say you're looking for a replacement for a Chelsea player, I would say Luca Dean is quite interesting for the next few weeks. As far as Mount, once again, I would probably avoid him. I'd either go for a Man City midfielder or just look at another kind of Liverpool player, maybe bringing back Salah into your team. If you're looking at someone at the same price range of Mount, I think that... Who's a good option right now? I think Foden is still a very kind of safe, secure option. Not necessarily explosive every week, but every 2 to 3 weeks he could be explosive. I think a lot of people have Bowen, so I imagine you have Bowen yourself. I don't think Rafinha is necessary template. If we go into the midfield, I think you could avoid Coutinho if you have Watkins in your team. So if you avoid Coutinho, you probably want to be looking at maybe even someone like Gallagher has a nice set of games here. So, you know, Norwich, Brentford, and Burnley, with exception to Chelsea in 26, are very, very nice games for me if you're looking towards Gallagher. Fernandes is an interesting option, but he's a little bit pricey. And the tough thing with Man United, I guess, is that Greenwood has looked okay as of late, but obviously his minutes are very, very kind of hit and miss at times, where he could be subbed off quite early if, let's say, Rangnick is not impressed with his performance. So we've seen that several times, but I think he has been getting consistent starts. So Greenwood would be a huge differential at the same price of Mount, roughly. So that could be interesting. Let's actually look at specifically under Mount's price. So I think Bernardo's definitely not a transfer I'd book in. Unfortunately, Arsenal suffer a similar kind of fate where they have 2 blanks in 25 and 26. Even though they have some games to be rescheduled, I just don't think it's worth it because all the games that Arsenal are due to actually have rescheduled are very, very poor. So their double game weeks aren't going to be that interesting regardless. So yeah, I think you're kind of looking at a situation where you probably want to actually go for a big differential, maybe like a Greenwood at this point in time. Unless you already have and are happy with players like Rafinha, who is average fixtures, I would say, or Bowen, who has been in sky high kind of good form. And that's if you have Watkins in your team. The nice thing about having Watkins in your team as well is maybe you could also, I was kind of showing this on the stream earlier. If let's say you want to go for Salah and Fernandes, what have I done here? Kind of price restricted this, haven't I? So if I go for Salah and Fernandes, then Ramsey is someone who's really helpful because he actually rounds out teams quite well. So if we look at Rafinha, I mean, I can even push him up ideally into someone a little bit more pricey. I can maybe save a bit of money by going for Dean, as I kind of mentioned. This is a kind of almost like a wildcard structure, I guess. If we go for Broja in the forward position here, and then maybe go for Watkins, this would actually be quite an interesting team, in my opinion. Something like this, where maybe you could also replace Madison too. But as I said, the hidden kind of secret with Madison is that he has really nice games that should be rescheduled, with exception to Chelsea. So these kind of Norwich, Burnley games, Everton games should be kind of interceded with around this 24 to 28 run. So I am actually very happy to keep Madison in my team, just in case one of those games props up in one of these fixtures. Fernandes also seems to have a high potential of getting a double in 25, where on top of Southampton, I think they could also be playing Brighton. We'll see what happens there, but you could also go for a structure like this, where you keep Watkins, you keep Dean, so that really covers you off Aston Villa, who should have some doubles. The one kind of other player I would say, if you don't want to go for Fernandes, is honestly, I think Heung-min Son is coming back from injury, right? If we can actually follow the injury news a little bit. I think Conte didn't really kind of spare any news in terms of the injuries, but it seems like I think Son should be pretty close to coming back from injury, at least around February time. And we know that there's a big kind of lag between the end of this game week in 23 and then the start of 24. So that could be Son coming back as well. And if we look at Spurs, if I look at Son, for example, in the midfield position, Son's interesting, right? Because Son has really nice fixtures, with exception to Arsenal, that could be rescheduled. So this Burnley and Brighton game are nice, and the only tough game here I would say is Man City until 29, where they play United, where that could still be quite a kind of both teams to score type game. So Son is interesting as well to think about. Your team is so Liam says his team is Ben White, Cancelo, Trent, White, and then I think, okay, so you mentioned White twice. Get rid of Rudiger, then Jota, Bowen, Salah, Madison, and then a cheap guy, and then Watkins, Antonio, and another cheap guy, also Ramsdale. So I guess I would say probably you might need a you might need a substitute keeper in the weeks where Ramsdale can't play. Stick or twist with Saka. I would actually say have a look at how many Chelsea and Arsenal players you have, Licorice, and then make a decision on whether you want to stick with Saka, because Saka has good games post 28. But if you can survive without him until 28, then it makes sense. But if you're owning too many Chelsea and Arsenal players, I think it is a good time to move out of them. Am I getting out of Cody soon? Probably not, Dennis. I think I just keep him as a kind of big insurance option, because the nice thing about Wolves off the bench is that they have come in quite consistently this season versus some top teams, and getting some clean sheets for some very good sides. Yeah, Chelsea fixture swing. Okay, Stannis. Yeah, I get what you mean. I think at that point in time, yeah, definitely Mount and James are really interesting, Stannis. So yeah, I would definitely save up money. So for example, like with Madison, I would probably maybe move out of Madison into someone like Mount around that time. Did I regret the early wild card? Not necessarily. I think everyone always gets injured. I mean, you can't kind of anticipate that. That was the big bummer for me, where I missed Son. But I think the wild card has helped me kind of pick up a little bit of steam in my team, where at least I managed to get Laporte into the team, and the wild card really helped me get Bowen without taking any hits too. So I was quite happy about getting Laporte and Cody in the wild card, because I think Cody is a bit more of a long-term option for me. I guess the regret's probably going to be the double up of Everton, a little bit too ambitious, and the same mistake in a sense was also followed through in this Watford week. But sometimes you have to kind of take the chances, I think, and play a little bit more aggressive and hope that kind of goes your way. And it hasn't gone my way, but Laporte has saved me in back-to-back weeks, so he was a nice little addition on the wild card too, as well as bringing in Sanchez, where I'm a lot more comfortable now with having two keepers, because that allows me for a bench boost at any time that I really want. So I like the fact that even if I wildcard, because I've wildcard in 21, I have a very deep bench nowadays, and maybe let's say with exception to Reguilon, if he moves to Dean, I could even play a bench boost in any of these weeks, and it could be a very big differential compared to other bench boosts that people would be looking at in future double game weeks. Henry says about that Salah and Ronaldo thing, I can only fit them both in if I take out Jota. I'd honestly probably think about keeping Ronaldo during that run, but it's up to you. It also depends on what your plans are for 27, because a lot of people were saying that they want a free hit on 27 to address the Liverpool triple miss. So it's up to you. Cody or Ait Nuri? Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I would actually probably go for Ait Nuri. Leicester doubles are unlikely before 28 because they're involved in Europa Conference League playoffs. That's a good point, CM Punk. I'll have a look into that and probably just take Madison out of my team then in that case. Your son, Ronaldo and Jota. Thinking of selling Jota for Mo, then selling King for Antonio. Also, it's LFC Krish. I'm so sorry, missed that out actually. Um, so I think if you have Son, Ronaldo, and Jota, I guess you keep Son, and he would be a great differential. Setting Jota for Mo feels weird, but then I guess if you can upgrade King to Antonio, that's not too bad. Do you already have Bowen in your team though? Nice to see you back, Quab. I haven't seen you in a while. Awesome to actually have you around, and we'll probably enjoy having you in Discord as well. If I still had my wild card, what game week would I like to use it? I'd probably say, yeah, either around a 30 or 36. Um, King, Dennis Gray, and Dawson start 2 for the next week. I mean, I'd probably actually play tough one. I'd probably play Gray and maybe make a decision between King and Dennis. I still think Watford can probably score versus West Ham. I don't think West Ham have the best defense at all. Hey Harold, hope you're doing well. Your team is De Gea, Lamptey, Trent, Cancelo, Laporte, Sufal, Martinelli, Jota, KDB, Bowen, Gray, Watkins, King, and CR7. Who do you think I should target moving out? Um, Maybe Martinelli in the short term, just because Arsenal have some blanks, and that kind of allows you to get a little bit of a stronger midfield. And then I would also probably say, looking at your team, do you want to keep Ronaldo for the game week 25 double? And if you do want to take Ronaldo out for Salah in the short term, then you could do that. But otherwise, I would probably stick with that team until around 28-ish. What do I think about Ward-Prowse's differential? The thing about Ward-Prowse for me is that he's very inconsistent. Not because he's a bad player. I just think that he scores in unexpected games because the way he scores is not necessarily where, for example, if you look at a team like City where they play against a weaker opponent, it's almost like they're cutting an opponent 1,000 times, right? So kind of like classic, art of war quote. And so basically any City player has much more chances of scoring, whereas Ward-Prowse's main way of scoring is through set pieces, and that can come through some of the tough games as well. So if you look at Tottenham as a game where he scored, if I was a Ward-Prowse owner, I probably wouldn't have actually put him on the field. So it's kind of tough to actually guess when exactly Ward-Prowse does well. I'll have a look at some of the questions on Twitter very quickly. What are my feelings about holding KDB through game week 25 and then swap him for Salah in 26? So Steve, I would just say, what are you going to do about the Liverpool blank in 27? If you're free hitting in 27, then I'll have a look. Ayrton says you have Lamptey perfect run of games after his blank in 24. See, that's the thing I've mentioned about Lamptey and why I've kind of downgraded him from my cheat sheet over the last few weeks and actually kept Cucurella quite high. I think the minutes are definitely going to be a big problem, and I don't see that changing too much this season. When would I be thinking of bringing Wolves assets if I had none? I mean, I don't think right now there's a priority to really look at Wolves assets. I think the priority right now is to actually look at Aston Villa assets. But I'm actually going to have a look at some Twitter questions. So let's have a look at Jerome Robinson. Planning to go with his team from next week, but the question is, which one of the front 8 do you bench? Whew, tough question. So we're probably going to play, I mean, Cancelo's a nice game. Reguilon's a tough one because we don't even know if he's going to start right now. I think you probably still play Davies. You definitely play Trent, Salah, Jota. Okay, let's just think about the front line. I'd probably like to play the whole front line. I'd probably like to play the whole midfield as well. Maybe we have to bench. Yeah, I guess in this situation we do bench DCL here. Maybe. We bench DCL, we play a 3-5-2. We just play Cancelo, Dalot, and Trent, maybe. Yeah. I think that's what you'd probably do, and actually just play De Gea. And maybe if you're scared of, let's say, going for Dalot, then just play De Gea and then someone like Davies. Because the big risk I have with Reguilon is, what if he comes off the bench? I think that could be a huge risk. So I'm not a big fan of Reguilon right now. Like, kind of starting him, I think there's a bit of a risk with Reguilon. But yeah. So let's have a look at Jaden. This looks like a pretty monster team, actually. That guy, I'm able to hold transfer this week. It's been like 200 game weeks since I've been able to do that. Let's have a look. I mean, yeah, definitely you can play Cancelo. Not exactly sure what exactly Tomiyasu's situation is. I guess he has some sort of training injury. He's definitely been playing too many games for Arsenal, which is what Arteta actually suggested a few press conferences ago when he actually missed a game after a bit of a knock. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great team, and it doesn't really need any transfers, and looks good to me now that you have Salah back in your team. All right, let's have a look at Jerome's question. Yeah, 352. Yeah, agree. Let's have a look at Janga's question. You're thinking of bidding Rudiger this week. Do you see any other potential transfer you could do? Yeah, interesting. Rudiger for Laporte. Yeah, I think it's Laporte or Dean. That's pretty much the only kind of transfers I can see. You kind of already have Coutinho in your team, but not necessarily Watkins, so that maybe is good coverage. Yeah, I'd probably be happy with either. If you wanted Salah plus Ronaldo, I think Jota has to make way. Let's have a look. All right, cool. That's a very strong defense, and hopefully you get Lowton back. I think he might be missing due to COVID. Otherwise, I can't see a reason why he's missed games necessarily. But at the cost of Jota. Hmm. Yeah, I think if you actually want Salah in the short term and you actually want to drop Jota and you don't want a free hit in 27, then actually that makes a lot of sense. Maria, with only one free transfer and 0.9, you really want Salah. Can't get Salah for Bruno for one transfer. With this squad, what would you do? If I had a squad like this, I would actually definitely keep Fernandes until 26, right? Because, and maybe if you're considering a free hit in 27, actually, otherwise, I think there's no reason to really go Salah until 28. So that's the big kind of situation that everyone kind of has to determine for their team. I don't have another spare free hit, and I don't really want to use the free hit on the blank game week in 27. So if I was someone who was going to Salah now, I'd have to just live with the fact that I have three people on the bench by default. And maybe even be happy to play with 10 people if let's say someone misses a game in my team. Ayrton, so team for Gameweek 24, you want Dean and Salah in, worth a -4, or start Emerson Royale and grade to Salah for free. So is it worth a -4? Because you already have Diaz, Trent, Cancelo, which is very, very good for the week. Royale probably also starts that game too. Worst case scenario. I think in this scenario, it's probably not worth the -4. And the reason why I say that is just because Royale, I think, still has a good game, relatively. But it's also up to you. Like, for example, I am kind of chasing a little bit of upside here with Dean, because I think Cody versus Arsenal, not exactly the best game. I imagine that could actually end up being a 0-0 game, but I have a worse situation than you with Reguilon, where Reguilon is not even, playing consistent minutes. Like, I mean, look at this halftime sub was a bit rough. 0 minutes play versus Chelsea was also very rough. I'm not exactly sure if that was injury related, but those are the kind of situations I have to deal with when I'm thinking about moving out of Dean. With Royale, I would say his minutes are a bit more nailed because he is a bit more physical than Reguilon. So what is Royale's minutes been kind of like? Just as bad as well. Well, I guess Tottenham did play a flat back. It's a tough situation. And then but Lamptey does have a blank. Could we play anyone else? Maybe Dennis. I mean, I think Dennis versus. I think Dennis in versus West Ham's interesting. I mean, he's already scored versus West Ham once this season. Am I not opening up my DM? Sorry, CM Punk. You mean like in new message requests? All right, here we go. 7.5 million in the bank. Would you upgrade Mora or Bernardo to Salah? I'd probably upgrade Mora, to be honest. Yeah, I'd probably upgrade Mora. What is your situation? Okay, you're going for Laporte. Yeah, that makes sense. Manish. So you still have Huang in your team, but Salah comes back. You've got a playing midfield 5, which I actually really like. So I guess we just need to make ourselves either push towards a 4-5-1. I'd probably do that. Things got personal between me and Dennis after -2 captain. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat as well, but I still think he's a good shout versus West Ham. I see what you mean with Royale though. This is your initial team for Gameweek 24. You have 2 free transfers and 2.7 in the bank. So planning to go Madison plus Bernard to Salah Brownhill. Thoughts on this move, or if there are any other moves? I would say, can you afford Ramsey? Because otherwise, I think the transfers are nice, but I think Ramsey's almost a must. Manish. Yep. So I've kind of responded to that. So what is everyone's team value? Mine's not too high, I don't think. I don't think I've actually been building much team value this season. I'll probably have to look at that later. I mean, my team value is like 105.5 million with 10 million in the bank. So yeah. I'm not gonna bring in Salah early, Harold. I mean, we don't know what's gonna happen. He could literally get it injured versus Ivory Coast. So yeah. I mean, Gray has more chances of playing double game weeks Bivec, so I would probably take Trossard out of my team first. Team value is 107. That's pretty monstrous nuisance. I didn't get James very early, so I probably lost a lot of team value there. And same thing, I guess, with not going for Ramsdale early. So that's probably a lot of team value lost compared to most teams. Not to mention, I actually went, I think, out of Antonio, then I think went back in to Antonio. So I lost a little bit of value there, but my team is also a bit more, I guess, malleable now that I'm not kind of price locked into a lot of players that I have a lot of kind of hidden value stored over. So that's kind of a nice position. So yeah, pretty much planning to spend most of my cash as much as possible this week and get rid of some of the problem players in my team, such as a Reguilon and I don't know, maybe have to make a decision between Madison and Gray. We'll see what happens there. But that also allows me to, in the future, boost up another forward. We'll see what happens with the double news as well. Your team value is so low as you didn't have James in your team. Yeah, exactly. I pretty much brought him when he was doing bad as well. Not exactly the wisest transfer, but on paper, I mean, he was having an excellent season, and I didn't really see it stopping so abruptly. But yeah, his form was pretty much kind of in tandem with the Chilwell injury as well. You know, that really hurt, I think, Chelsea overall, where instead of actually being so creative on both wings and both outlets, they kind of have regressed quite a lot. So they were kind of reliant on maybe James's work rate on the right hand side, and Alonso wouldn't contribute as much as someone like a Chilwell would in terms of spreading the field. FPL, when you have like 5 red arrows in a row, doesn't hit the same. I mean, check this out. This is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I had 9 red arrows in a row. Pretty rough period, not gonna lie. But hoping to actually make my way back to around 2.5k ish, which was where I peaked. The whole Watford narrative changes after Ranieri sacking. Maybe less attack, more CS in the future. I mean, honestly, when you watch the Watford defenders, I just generally struggle to think that they could ever get clean sheets. Like, the quality of the defenders individually is shocking. So yeah, I'm really not impressed with Watford. Antonio is a legitimate captain option this week. I agree. I think Bowen is still a little bit of a better captaincy option. So right now, I've kind of got a temporary kind of placeholder on Bowen captaincy. And maybe I'll take one of Madison and Gray out. But I would still be quite happy to maybe play Dennis or King versus Watford. Sorry, I mean West Ham. I'll need to take Reguilon because that's basically pretty much booked in for Dean. And we'll see what happens there. Edouard better option than Antonio. If you're talking about this week, potentially, yeah, because I think Edouard's versus Norwich again, right? Which is a very good fixture. When you say better option, do you mean as a kind of captain? Right. Okay. If he had a knock, then I think in that case, then he should hopefully be able to play the next one. But then I think if he's potentially fully fit, then that's. Do you think? Well, I guess there's actually a lot of rest time, right? There's a lot of rest period, and he doesn't actually play for the Brazilian national team. Probably, I mean, as in he probably won't play for the Brazilian national team during this kind of run. So that should be quite nice. Glazer's out. You don't want to sell Bruno in case we get a double. Yep, preferred way of getting Salah is removing Bernardo, Alonso, and Antonio. Two of them have good fixtures. I guess you can take Alonso out, but honestly, if you prefer keeping Bernardo and Fernandes in your team, I guess yeah, Bernardo should really make way. I think I might have missed some message requests. Yep, two premium in the midfield's nice. Is Foden still a viable asset? What are the best City assets for going forward? Own Salah, by the way, so not a lot of money. I think Foden makes the most sense. Like he is super sensible at that kind of price point. So like if I look at my own team, for example, if I get Salah in, I mean I've got the money to go for Foden, but I don't even have the money. I mean Mahrez is interesting as well, actually. Mahrez coming back from AFCON will be super interesting, I think. I think Mahrez can be a huge differential this week. Huge. Remember, Mahrez left to AFCON with fantastic form. All right, let's go back to YouTube chat very quickly. Laporte has been an unsung hero, secretly now racking to 100, but transferring now would be point chasing with no doubles and potential rotation through CL, or choose. Yeah, I think Dean has more upside right now as a kind of player in the team. Zaha is coming back. I mean, but honestly, has Zaha had that good of a season even before he actually left? I mean, look at Zaha kind of here. I mean, Gallagher is kind of smoking him. Edouard as well. I think the reason why Edouard's interesting is because, first of all, he's cheaper than Zaha, and second of all, he doesn't occupy a midfield space. And I think that's the kind of main interest in Edouard, really. Had Laporte last 6 weeks, he's been so consistent, and I think Pep would completely agree with you there. With Sterling's recent form, it's hard to think they won't share minutes on the right wing. That's true, but I think Sterling could also contend with kind of striker positions and also left wing. He also hasn't had the best of form, right? Sterling was substituted off in the 59th minute. Algeria might have damaged Mahrez over AFCON. Well, then I mean, I think it's different, right? Club and country is always different, like the scenarios and the situations. You said the same about Newcastle. It's just how that Eddie Howe and Trippier that changed. Signs were there for them. They can only do much with that squad. What do you talk about specifically, Sahaj? Rashford and Ramsey or Madison and Rafinha? I mean, I don't know about Rashford this season. I think he costs a little bit too much money. But at the same time, I like what Ramsey brings to the table, because he can be someone who you can just keep on the bench permanently and you don't feel bad about it because he's quite cheap. So if you want to kind of gamble on Rashford short term, that's interesting. I would actually find that if you don't want to go Fernandes and you don't want to spend that kind of money, that Greenwood would be a little bit more interesting in the short term. Henry says, you want to go Laporte, but you're worried about UCL rotation, especially since the league is won. Yeah, that's a fair point. And that's why I still think Dean has the highest upside of any defender for the next few weeks, because he's basically taking set pieces now for Aston Villa, and he's also looked pretty close to actually scoring. So he looks very interesting. Edouard's going to be a huge differential this week, isn't he? There's so many transfers I really want to make. It's going to be tough. But then Norwich as well have looked pretty good lately. Let's have a look at their kind of maybe defensive stats. I know they did kind of get destroyed by Crystal Palace, but I mean, look at the expected goals in Norwich in that game versus Watford. I mean, how shocking is that? Scoring 3 goals from 0.93. So it's really only been 2 games in a row. I don't know. It's a tough one. I think Edouard's seems like a huge differential. He's going to be really struggle, I think. A really big struggle to kind of deal with. And then Gray, I'm not even sure how well he does. But then Everton just aren't building too many chances. So I'd rather kind of take my chances with Maddison. This West Ham game could hopefully be quite explosive. In continuation with Watford narrative changing with management switch, Newcastle example, keeping CS's best chances are of bottom sides. Yep, I completely agree with you. But I think Watford, for example, was a team that clearly was trying to outscore opponents, although they pretty much ran out of steam because they're reliant on the same amount of players. I think Watford has one of the weakest benches as well in the Prem. Not saying that Newcastle have a good bench themselves, but they have at least a little bit more midfield depth as an example. Whereas week on week, I think Watford, you actually end up seeing the same players, especially in attacking positions, with Sarr going to AFCON as well. Zaha coming back, more likely to see Mateta dropped and Edouard playing more centrally. I agree. Yep. Ramsey might be at doubt, especially if Luis would be out of the starting side. You just need Ben Foster to play next week since your rival has Ramsey on the bench. Right, it has a rival. Oh, your rival has kind of played Ben Foster. Matt Target removed himself from his FPL team when Dean was signed. Safe to say Dean is locked. Man, that's shocking. Imagine having to transfer yourself out because you know that you're going to be on the bench for a while. Can I do a wildcard draft? Yeah, absolutely, I can do a wildcard draft. Okay. A few options, right? So Cody, questionable. Maybe he could be Ait Nuri right now. I think you play Dean, Laporte, Cancelo, Trent. Maybe you drop Maddison. I think you really should go Fernandes, Ramsey, and then you should go Salah. And then I think you can actually go Edouard here. Maybe just completely drop Watford for now. And then I think this is kind of a perfect wildcard draft. If you don't want to go De Gea and you want to keep Ramsdale, because one thing about Ramsdale that I'll mention to you guys right now is that if you look at the blanks for Brighton, there's a blank in 24, there's a blank in 27, right? Ramsdale, blank in 25. Oh, wait, sorry, they do have a double blank in 27. Oh, no, sorry, they don't, sorry. I mean, Sanchez only has a blank in 24. He plays Aston Villa in 27. So Ramsdale actually has really nice kind of coverage by Sanchez, because we're looking at basically 25 versus Watford and 27 versus Villa, which is not the easiest game, but it is a game where hopefully Brighton can get at least a couple of saves, and you're only looking at 1 week to replace Ramsdale. So if you want to go for an Arsenal defense, you could maybe drop Ait Nouri if you're not interested in the Wolves defense, and then go Dalot. If you want that kind of upside with maybe a potential Man United double game week coming soon, that's an option too. As I said, you kind of want to be playing around with Ramsdale, De Gea, and Sa, and you want to be playing around with Dello and Ait-Nouri, I think, at this point in time. Cucurella is an option too if you have a little bit more money to spend in the defense, but I wouldn't be too excited by him. Let's just go with Ait-Nouri for now in this structure. And then I think you can kind of play around with this. So the question here with Antonio is, I would probably say I would still probably like to have Antonio over Watkins, but that's I think it's something that really comes down to choice. You could go for Watkins, and we do have a lot of money in the bank as well. And so you're probably going to be looking at this team and saying, you know, could we kind of push up and maybe go for another City player? And maybe that is the answer, but I probably wouldn't do that. If let's say you don't want to go for Edouard and you want to just keep King in your team, there is also a possibility that you can actually maybe push someone at Bowen's price into a Foden if you absolutely must. But I probably wouldn't do that either. I kind of like the money in the bank to play with the structure where maybe you go Edouard, and then we start off immediately with playing Edouard, Watkins, Jota, Fernandes, Bowen, Salah, and then this kind of front four. So we play a 4-4-2 immediately, and you kind of have a flexi rotation between Broja and Edouard, but also a team that could at sometimes be a 4-5-1. So for example, if Ramsey has double game week, he would be very interesting coming off the bench in a double, because we know he's already been quite exceptional under Gerrard, I would say. We've basically seen 2 goals, 1 assist since Gerrard has come in. So he's been quite electric, and the minutes are very consistent too with Ramsey, which is a really nice plus. So yeah, that's probably kind of my wildcard draft, like a kind of template that I would be looking at. Completely up to you. I obviously have a few problem childs in my team. It would probably be one of the Watford players that I have to kind of go away from. I think I'm tempted to move away from King. Tempted to keep Dennis in my team, even though he's been a bit of a hothead and he's kind of done me over lately. And then maybe move out of Gray because he's just not been exceptional. Because I actually have so much money in the bank, like I don't know. It has to be a week where I go for Salah and Fernandes. Sorry, or Fernandes. So that's going to be on my mind. And then, yeah, probably Reguilon out for Dean. Maybe -4 this week, personally. You think Fernandes over KDB because United should have double? Yeah, I agree. DCL, I mean, for me, it's just we need to see what happens with the kind of new manager, I would say. Why Fernandes over KDB? He might have a double game week in 25. Dennis won't play the second game week of this double game week. Yeah, exactly. They don't have a game in the meantime. Yeah, exactly. So he's going to miss the game versus Burnley. Planet FPL did talk about Ramsey, and later down the line could block Inform Coutinho and keep an eye Buendia. I mean, Buendia, I don't think he's done enough this season or contributed enough in attacking play to actually be worthwhile as an asset. I mean, he scored a beautiful kind of outside of the box goal, if I remember correctly. And then he scored the goal off the set piece last week, or this week with Dean. But yeah, plot twist, Dennis deliberately took the red because he didn't get the chance to go to AFCON by Watford and punish us for only caring about FPL. You could be right. Is Ronaldo a hold if you can have him alongside Salah and Foden? I would say so, yeah. I think Ronaldo is a very reasonable hold until 28. DCL replacing CR7 for me to fund Salah. Fair enough. Why is ASM the top transfer in striker this week? I think it's just because he's shown a little bit of good form lately. But, you know, they also kind of have Wood in the team as well. And Wood playing central might actually affect how effective ASM is going to be. So I'm not really sure about ASM being a great option. I really do like an Edouard transfer this week. If you want to move away from one of the Watford players. Who's going to be on Villa penalties if Ings isn't on the pitch? El Ghazi is gone. It could, I think it could be Coutinho, right? Do you think Coutinho could take penalties? Or am I crazy? Or do you think it just goes to Watkins? Salah or Ramsdale to complement De Gea on Wildcard? It's a good question. I think we probably would have to just look at the actual lineups. I'm not a big fan of rotating 2 premium keepers, though. I have to say that. I would actually just rather just go Ramsdale and then a cheaper keeper. That guy. That makes sense. But I would say that, for example, like dead ending your team sometimes is a good idea, right? Because if you do have a wild card as an example, then that's the kind of point, right? You kind of deliberately go against the grain of your long term team by trying to attack the short term. So it that's a general good kind of like logic that to hold, but I would say that dead ending is also a very viable strategy that people should look out for. Ronaldo for United's double in Gaming 25, then transfer for Kane for Spurs double in Gaming 26 sounds like a good plan. That's a pretty good plan. What do you think happens to Wilson plus Wood when they're both fit? I mean, Wilson's pretty far off from being fit, right? As far as I'm aware. DM my team on Twitter. I'll have a look at that very quickly. Newcastle defense did a number on Leeds. Leeds at their home is starting both DCL and Gray. Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm not really a big fan of keeping Gray in my team, to be quite honest. Got Coutinho early was a little disappointing in the second game. Yeah, I mean, he was so explosive as a super sub. What do you? I think yeah, Ziyech is a very great different. I actually went for Ziyech last season in FPL for a brief stint. I think Ziyech will be interesting. If Chelsea keep playing on four in the back, I think that depends on because Reece James might come back quite soon, so that kind of accommodates the back five a little bit more. But I think like if they play the kind of flat structure that they played versus they kind of played a 4-3-3, right? Like realistically, a very kind of standard 4-3-3 versus Tottenham. In that kind of situation, I don't know. Maybe Ziyech makes a bit more sense. Thoughts on Elanga? I mean, I have no thoughts on him in FPL, but I think he's definitely an interesting prospect for the future. So yeah, but I mean, I think FPL wise, I've got no comments on him. It'll be interesting to kind of pick up. I mean, Gallagher is also an interesting kind of pick up this week as well. Either Gallagher or Edouard. Wouldn't it be nice if Norwich kept a clean sheet versus Crystal Palace? Jota's not looking great going forwards. Maybe switch him for Salah. I mean, the thing is, Jota is still so consistent, though, right? At his kind of price. I mean, look, like we're still talking about the third highest point scoring midfielder in the game. It's a weird one. He might benefit from Salah coming back, though. That's another thing, too. I mean, I get that Elanga has been starting in the front three, but I mean, we've also seen, for example, Jadon Sancho have multiple starts back to back, right? With no kind of production. I don't think starting for Man United is good enough argument for a player to be worth it from an FPL point of view, whether they're actually productive or not, because it's ultimately also just about yeah. I mean, it's ultimately just about how much they can contribute from a goals and assist point of view. It's not necessarily whether they're actually providing a lot in terms of work rate on the ball and things like that. So yeah, 4.8, but it's still yeah, 4 is an interesting price. Captain Bowen or Edouard? Honestly, I'd probably go with Bowen, but I think Edouard's a nice differential. Count on Jota for minutes, to be honest, from now on, and the whole team was gassed. Minutes will be heavily managed. Imagine if Ronaldo didn't go to United, Green would have the best value player in the game. Could be. I think Fernandes would still be the best value player in the game, right? Because he would still be on pens, still maybe play a little bit more attacking, maybe a little bit higher up in the field. Yeah, I agree. Jota playing in the center is nice. So any game when Jota plays in the center, he pretty much is good for at least one goal or one assist. I still also think we haven't seen much form from Firmino, so that's the one kind of player that's going to stop Jota from playing, and he hasn't been great. So that's kind of a nice positive if you're keeping Jota in your team. I just don't see Jota as a short-term sell in the near future, I guess. King to Edouard. Palace look decent versus Liverpool. Yep. Makes sense. Would you prefer going for Edouard, or would you prefer going for Gallagher? I guess is my question back to you. My streams are way more calm. See Andy and he's just stressing. I mean, I think Andy's been bald for a while, so I doubt FPL is making him go any bolder. And Andy, to be fair, I haven't actually watched many of his streams because I'm obviously streaming at the same time as everyone else. But Andy always seems to be someone who thinks. I think this season has been quite like the start for him was quite tough, but I think he's recovered really well, especially during this kind of stint where he picked up Ronaldo, got some good points from Ronaldo too. So I think Andy's doing great, and I mean he's a FPL legend, so I think he's just fine. Um, yeah, I agree with Firmino, but I think this we've seen definitely a little bit less work rate from Firmino, maybe because of the fact that he's been kind of injured in and out this season. Um, I know he drops deep, but I mean that's not really the point, is it? It's also about um, Firmino was almost like a box to box CM, and I feel like his kind of aggression in terms of like recovery and ball recovery has kind of dropped a little bit. So his aggressiveness was something that definitely benefited Salah. I didn't really I wasn't necessarily a big fan of Jota actually playing with Salah in the past, but I think he's such an exceptional poacher at times that he's really hard to take out of your team. Transfer Fernandes in or KDB? I'd probably still say Fernandes just because only for Gameweek 24. Good question. Probably just KDB if it's only for 24. You brought Robertson this week. Jota to Salah as the plan. Allows me to keep Foden as well. That's interesting, Flying Dutchman. That's nice. I think Sterling is not a good pick, especially with Mahrez coming back. I think Sterling will have to kind of have his minutes managed. Sa or De Gea on a wild card. You have Sanchez on the bench. Probably De Gea. Antonio leaving for Jamaica. Yep, potentially. Do you think Firmino risks Jota's spot? I think he does, but as I said, I think Firmino's kind of work rate and maybe just due to the fact that he's been injured at many times this season has meant that Jota has actually kept his spot in the team more often than not. So I'm not too worried about dropping Jota for now. I do prefer Mahrez actually, Finlay. Is it worth selling Salah for Ziyech? No, especially if you have Salah in your team. I don't think there's any reason to drop Salah, especially since he's coming back. You would have kept him for a reason. But yeah, I think I'm going to end the stream here, guys. I think that's been a good kind of solid hour and a half. A good sort of set of planning ahead. We did have a look at some transfer trends. Interesting to see where people have gone. Mostly just back into premium defenders, it seems like, is the status quo. Midfield-wise, a lot of people are actually attacking some of the fixtures as well. Moving out of Arsenal players, moving out of Chelsea players as well, into players who have really good games, single game weeks at least, in De Bruyne, potential doubles in Coutinho, and also very good singles in Gallagher as well. And the same kind of scenario was the case with the forwards, where people are moving into Edouard, a smaller percentage, and then some people moving back into Antonio, Broja, who's a very, very cheap option, and then say Maxman. I'd say definitely, obviously, Sargent and Daka. These are more casual type plays where people are kind of knee-jerking a little bit. I'm surprised people have gone out of Vardy. I'm surprised people still own Vardy at this point, but people have gone out of Vardy. And as many people as possible really going out of Ronaldo, which is a bit of a weird one here, because I think Ronaldo still is quite exceptional and interesting until 28. What to do with Martinelli? I'd probably take him out of the team. I think there's a lot of midfielders that you can play around with, maybe even an Aston Villa midfielder. Mope could potentially have the potential to be a great differential. I mean, he always is a great differential. That's what Mope is. But yeah, blatant FPL over rank 4. Anyone know him? I'm not actually sure. I mean, we can have a look at the overall right now. So he's kind of he's in a weird spot where I think his team he could actually wildcard very quickly, but then I think he has to address both Mount and Tierney quite soon. Very, very strong team though, for sure. And then he's still got Fernandes at least. So I think a lot of people who've kind of risen up lately, of course, were the people who quite wisely went for Fernandes as well in the last few weeks, especially with the captaincy in the previous week. So yeah, I mean, Gangsters Alice has still been killing it as well, especially since he didn't have Fernandes, I think, for the previous week. So he's held on very closely, but yeah. Look how close this is. De Bruyne captaincy. It's actually a lot closer, because I think Focal and Gangsters had a bit of a lead, but now the the kind of top 10-ish, I think, are so close to each other in terms of points. Everything's to kind of play for, which is really cool. A lot of Fernandes owners still, yeah, kind of around these kind of tiers. Interesting. I think Fernandes will definitely be explosive in 25 again, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, guys, 2 City defense plus Ederson overkill. I do think that's overkill. I just think you don't want to be spending too much money in terms of Ederson, because the thing is, Ederson is still overpriced compared to some of the other defenders in City. And then second of all, he doesn't really contribute in terms of goals and assists, right? So if you look at Laporte and Diaz, the reason why they've scored so much points is because they've done tremendously well with goals and assists. As far as Focal falling off, I mean, I think Focal had he played his chips pretty much perfectly, and it's just been a bit of variance with him lately. I think missing Fernandes is the main reason why he fell off, right? So that's entirely normal. Do you think Fernandes or Ronaldo is the United asset to own? If you had Ronaldo, would you make the swap to Fernandes? I mean, it's a tough question. I actually think Fernandes is probably the better asset to own. But the thing with United too is that they just don't play consistently well. My rank's not great. It's just 77k. So I kind of peaked 2.5k this season, and then took a massive fall owning Kane and owning Cornet. And then have slowly kind of risen back lately. So hopefully I can climb back up there. But yeah, I think Focal still has a very good team if you look at the kind of structure of his team. And I think he's been making good choices with captaincies. I've been terrible with captaincies this season. The worst one, I think, being Liverpool versus Everton. Can't remember which game this was. Probably going to be this week where I suffered so much. Nope, not this one. Probably the week before that. I can't exactly remember when. All right, let's have a look, actually. It was the Everton game. So Gameweek 14 was where I got absolutely murdered with a really bad captaincy. So I captained Trent in this week. Ironically, Trent actually outscored Salah during this entire run, with the exception to the Everton game here where he blanked. So I think this game, and this game, he outscored Salah. And this was the only one game where he did not score Salah. And then I got absolutely murdered by, I think, a 97% kind of ownership of Salah for the captaincy. So that was a nice little net minus 13 that week here. But other than that, I think my big mistakes this season, going for Guaita as a keeper, kind of a quarter way through the season, going for Kane over Son to kind of accommodate for the Ronaldo swap a little bit easier. And then also potentially a little bit of an early wild card that kind of took Ramsdale away from my team. But I would say that at the time I couldn't actually see Ramsdale, so that was more of a retrospective insight. But definitely Kane, we had already seen that he had a poor season, so that was definitely a mistake from my part. And then a bit of variance as well. So the postponements with the United game, the postponements with the Watford game, and the postponements with the Burnley game with the snow, and then the injuries to Cornet really hurt me. But I'm trying to obviously rank up week on week. Yassine says, hello, please, should I sell Sterling with Mahrez back, or is he still playing? You remember that reaction stream? Yeah, that was rough. I think Mahrez, I wouldn't plan on selling Sterling now, but I mean, if you're an aggressive player and you don't have any problems with your team, then I wouldn't have any problems with you going into Mahrez. Who would I rather have, Kane or Bruno? It depends on what's announced, really, in terms of the doubles. I would actually say I would prefer Kane at this point in time. So yeah. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys have a wonderful night, evening, morning, wherever you guys are. Afternoon, sorry. Coutinho, Ramsey. I'd probably go Ramsey because Ramsey allows you to have a double premium somewhere in your team. So I think Ramsey makes sense. And also, you can kind of hopefully cover Coutinho from Dean. I'd definitely go Dean over Laporte. My ideal back four is going to be Dean, Laporte, Cancelo, Trent. So that's going to be my back four next week onwards. So yeah, hope you guys take care, and I'll see you guys soon. Also, the cheat sheet's going to be uploaded very, very quickly. So I'm going to work towards getting that up. And yeah, everyone take care. Hope you guys stay safe.